2023 at 7 p.m. And we will start off with a roll call.
Ms. Weeks?
Here.
Mr. McGinnis?
Here.
Ms. Hunter?
Here.
Mr. Madewell?
Here.
And Ms. Caldwell?
Here. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so quickly, I'm just going to try to do a quick explanation of our meeting procedures and what to expect during this meeting. Basically, what we will do is we have our agenda, and we're going to run through our agenda tonight. We're going to do some old business. We're going to approve some meeting minutes. We have some organizational items since it's our first meeting of the new year. We'll have to get through those first. And then we will move on to our new business, where we will discuss the case that we have before us this evening. And during that time, how that works is staff will present the case. We'll ask any questions we have of staff, and then we'll have the applicant come forward and give any additional information they would like to tell us. And then at that point, we do open it up. Excuse me. We will open it up for public comment, and we do limit 3 minutes each per person, and try not to duplicate comments or questions, just to ease the flow of the meeting. At that time, we'll close it for public comment, and then we will have any more discussion amongst the board, go for a vote, go through our findings of facts, and go for a vote. So that's pretty much how the meeting will go. Yes, and then the next item we are going to do is I need to administer an oath. So anyone who is planning to speak this evening, you do need to stand up and raise your right hand. And is there anybody else who's, okay, if you, so at this time.
Let's clarify.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Just as a point of clarification, the meeting that we have here is a quasi-judicial meeting. So anybody that wishes to speak, may speak, will be asked to come to the podium, and the testimony that you give is going to be recorded. So if you think you may want to speak, I would encourage you to stand up, and you can either swear or affirm.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McGinnis, for that clarification. Appreciate that. So yes, at this time, I will administer an oath. So, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give to this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please say, I do. Okay, thank you. Okay, so first up tonight, we have on our agenda we need to approve some previous meeting minutes for November 1st, 2022. And I'll open up to the board if we have any comments or changes that need to be made on that. Okay, I did not have any changes. I read through it, so I don't know if anybody else had anything. Any kind of motion then?
I move that we approve the minutes of November 1st, 2022.
I'll second.
Okay. Roll call, please, for that.
Ms. Weeks?
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis?
Yes.
Ms. Hunter?
Yes.
Mr. Madewell?
Yes.
Ms. Caldwell?
I'll abstain since I wasn't present.
Okay. Thank you so much. Those have been approved. Okay. And so now we're going to move on to some organizational items. Like I said, this is our first meeting of the new year, so we have to go through some procedural items to get us going for this 2023 calendar year. So our first item for organizational items is an acknowledgement and acceptance of rules of procedure of the City of Clayton Board of Zoning Appeals. In our packets, the board, we all have received the rules of procedure, and I hope everybody had a chance to review them. And at this time, do we have any questions or comments for staff regarding anything within these rules of procedure? Okay, do I have a motion to acknowledge and accept these?
I move we acknowledge and accept the rules of procedure of the BCA.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Weeks?
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis?
Yes.
Ms. Hunter?
Yes.
Mr. Madewell?
Yes.
Ms. Caldwell?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, the next item that we board members all received in our packets is the 2023 schedule for the Board of Zoning Appeals, and it has all of our dates of our meetings and when things are due and deadlines and everything. The only thing I wanted to comment was it does look like July, our meeting will be the second Tuesday because of the holiday. So, all the other meetings are on the first Tuesday of the month. So Any questions or comments on that? Okay, do I hear a motion to approve that?
I move to approve the 2023 schedule.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Weeks?
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis?
Yes.
Ms. Hunter?
Yes.
Mr. Madewell?
Yes.
Ms. Caldwell?
Yes.
Okay, we are good. Everybody put those in your calendar. Okay, our next order of business is to appoint the 2023 Board of Zoning Appeals Chair. Do I hear a motion on that one?
I move that Jennifer Weeks continues as chair of the BZA for Clayton, Ohio.
I'll second that.
Okay, roll call?
Ms. Weeks?
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis?
Yes.
Ms. Hunter?
Yes.
Mr. Madewell?
Yes.
Ms. Caldwell?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then the next is the appointment of the vice chair for the 2023 Board of Zoning Appeals. Do I hear a motion for anybody that they would like?
I'll make a motion that Mr. McGinnis continue to stay on as vice chair.
Second.
Okay, roll call for that.
Ms. Weeks?
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis?
Yes.
Ms. Hunter?
Yes.
Mr. Madewell?
Yes.
Ms. Caldwell?
Yes.
Okay, and finally, the last thing on our organizational items is to appoint a board secretary. Do I hear a motion for that one?
I'll move to appoint Barb Seam as board secretary.
I'll second that.
Roll call?
Ms. Weeks?
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis?
Yes.
Ms. Hunter?
Yes.
Mr. Madewell?
Yes.
Ms. Caldwell?
Yes.
Okay, thank you all so much. Appreciate you all holding tight during that time. We concludes all of our organizational items we have for this evening. And at this time, we are going to open it up for new business, and this will be for our new case of case CU 23-01 for 295 East Salem Street. It is a request for a conditional use to allow a church and primary school at 295 East Salem Street in a residential mixed use or RMX zone. An application made by Foundation Capital Resources, Inc. They are the property owner. And at this time, I will turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Chair Weeks. Good evening, board members. To introduce the application, we received a conditional use application submitted by the applicant, Foundation Capital Resources, Inc. on December 13th, 2022. Subject to the request is approval of conditional uses for religious assembly, a church, and a school, primary through secondary. The property is located at 295 East Salem Street on the north side of East Salem Street, just east of the city's Janus Ward Center. Parcel ID is M600002150005. The area of the property is 9.71 acres. The zoning on the property is RMX, residential mixed use. A public notice was printed in the Brookville Star on December 21st, 2022, and letters were mailed to property owners within 300 feet of the applicant's property on December 20th, 2022. Next slide. This map shows you the surrounding area. The subject property is highlighted, and some of the zoning districts around the subject property. There are some additional RMX to the east and west, and then beyond that, you'll find residential single-unit district zoning. Next slide. And this is just the subject property close-up, the county auditor's aerial map. Next slide. Summary of the case. The property has been sitting vacant for some years, but historically has been used as both a church and a school. Since this property was last used, the city updated their planning and zoning code. All properties in the city received a new zoning classification, and this property received the RMX zoning district, which lists religious assembly and schools, primary and secondary, as conditional uses. A church will be leasing the facility and would like to use it for all of the following use types: church, which again is conditional; primary through secondary school, again conditional; child daycare center, that's a permitted use in the RMX, as is small event center and community facility activity center. Next slide. In your packets, you received a site plan from the applicant, again outlining the property and showing the different areas of the existing buildings. There is a church facility, 8,800 square feet. In the middle is the school facility, that's 12,000 square feet. And then to the east is the gym, which is 7,000 square feet. And there's a separate building to the west of the church, and that's going to be the youth building, that's 4,000 square feet. Overall, the building area of the facility is 31,800 square feet. It occupies about 7.5% of the total site area, which again is 9.7 acres. There are 306 parking spaces, which includes 6 handicap accessible spaces. Access to the site comes from 2 one-way drives. There's ingress on the east side of the property, and then egress from the west side of the property. Existing parking lot has 6 light poles, each with double fixtures, and both the ingress and egress drives have single fixture light poles. For stormwater collection, there are existing catch basins on site that carry water to an existing detention basin located just north of the youth building. And the site has a well for water, a newly replaced septic system for sanitary, and does have electric. Next slide. I've provided the site photos in a packet within your reports, but I'll just kind of show some of these. The top photos, again, are the rear parking lot, and the bottom photos are of the different components of kind of the rear of the existing facility. Next slide. More pictures of the church and the youth building. Next slide. I've got some pictures of the egress drive, the church, again, the youth building. Next slide. And this comes around to the front of the building where you see the front of the church, the school, and the gym. And then the ingress drive, kind of the bottom middle picture, is looking back toward East Salem for the ingress drive. And then the last picture, bottom right, is looking across East Salem at the septic system as a sand filter across the street on a separate parcel. Next slide. And then looking at the existing detention basin, which I referred to in the report, has some overgrowth, but you can see the inlets and what I believe to be the outlet for that detention basin. And then finally to the right is an existing playground, some playground equipment. So after reviewing consideration of the conditional use application, staff would recommend that the Board of Zoning Appeals approve the requested conditional uses with the following conditions: that the applicant is to comply with the federal ADA guidelines for restriping a parking lot and should provide 2 additional accessible parking spaces, and those should be van accessible. The applicant is to ensure that the inlet and outlets for the existing dry detention basin are in good working order and provide evidence of that fact to the City of Clayton. The applicant to clear the overgrown vegetation located in the existing dry detention basin, including weeds, cattails, and trees, just to ensure that the design volume of that basin is not compromised. And then finally, the applicant should trim the overgrowing vegetation in the northwest quadrant of the parking lot because when I was out there, it does sort of minimize the full width of the drive aisle in that area. So with that, next slide, we'll kind of leave up the site plan for any questions that you might have.
Seth, I got a couple of questions.
Okay.
Does the 9.7 acres include the septic property that's on the other side of Salem?
My understanding is the area that is outlined to the north side of Salem.
Okay, so that would be above and beyond then.
Yes.
Now, okay, you say it's been replaced, so newly replaced. What does that mean?
I would let the applicant speak to the full scope of work, but I think it was not working, and working with the EPA for approval, the applicant replaced. And again, I don't know the full scope of that, but I know that it is now working.
Okay, because typically you'd have leach fields, and you'd have to have 2 of them. You'd have to have one that you would be using and then be able to switch over at a later date based on usage and so forth and so on. And I was kind of curious about that because I read that in the application. I was like, really? It's underneath, on the other side of the road. So I just kind of wanted to ask that question.
Yeah.
Second question I had dealt with the history of the place. I know it's been there for a long time. I know it's church and all that, and I know there's a school facility there. When's the last time it was really used?
I did not uncover a specific date, but my understanding is, I would say at least 5 to maybe 7 years ago.
Okay, but
And I know the applicant can speak to that a little more specifically.
Okay, but it was used, and there were kids there and all that, so, you know.
In its history, it's been, yes, it's been both a school and a church. I'm not sure if there's been other uses, but I know in terms of the conditional uses that we're discussing tonight, it has been used that way in the past.
Okay. And I guess the reason for my questioning there is that if properties sit for an extended period of time, they tend to decay. You know, if nobody's in there, if nobody's doing maintenance, you know, turning on the lights, shutting them off, making sure the pipes don't burst, et cetera, et cetera. I was just kind of curious about the general repair of the property, since we're talking about pretty sizable lots here.
Yeah.
You know, and buildings and facilities. So I was kind of curious along those lines. We'll get into that, I guess, a little bit later in discovery then when we talk to the applicant about that. Is there any specific rule that we have about the retention pond that's back there? Do you know that if generally it's in good shape when it comes to retaining water, draining it away, so forth and so on, or is there any problem that may be existing there, you know, in addition to the cattails and you know, the vegetation that's grown?
I'm not aware of any issues with it other than the overgrowth. Presumably, it was designed at the time for that facility that's there. I don't have history on it. I don't have any kind of approvals that I can go back to on it, but presumably it was designed for the facility that we have before us.
Okay, because that would go back to when the original construction would be, you know, or maybe it was added on between then and now.
Could have been an update at some point, yeah.
It could have been.
Yeah.
Could have been. And I haven't myself known about any, you know, problem with groundwater runoff or anything along those lines. But, you know, that's why I was kind of curious along
Yeah.
those lines too, as to whether there's a latent problem there that the applicant may be getting themselves into if they're not careful.
Yep, I mean, I did see some water in the inlet outlet. It appeared to be moving a little bit in the outlet area, but other than that, I don't, you know, I can't really speak for.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
here
it's
within the
condition.
last 6 months, we haven't had a lot of rainfall, to be honest with you.
Right.
Not like the first half of last year. So,
Yep.
you know, it probably would have been interesting to see that and see what was going on in April.
Really.
But that's too long ago. You mentioned in the application, or in the application that we have here, about the lights for the parking lot. And the indication there is that we don't know whether they turned on or not, or whether they're in repair, or whether they're functional.
I've not seen them on, so I can't speak to whether or not they work, but I'm hopeful the applicant can. But they're there, and if they work, I think it would be good to make sure that they're maintained and properly working for the different types of uses that are proposed there.
Yeah, I was specifically thinking about shielding the lights, any direct lights from the neighbor property. I know that some of those lights can be pretty darn bright, and we do have, you know, for new development, for new lights, for new type of applications that have come in front of us, we've run into that before. You
Yeah.
know, we want to make sure they're shielded and so forth and so on, but if they're
That's
the
right.
old box lights, they may not be. And that's why I was kind of curious about what we were going to do when we find that bridge ahead of us.
Yeah, I mean, the fixtures do not appear to be shielded at all, but you're right. I mean, if it were a new development, a new parking lot, site lighting, we would require, in effect, night sky compliant lighting, so.
Correct, correct, and that's why I was kind of looking at that as well. Is the applicant considering using the current signage then and not putting new signs up, anything along those lines?
We've not had that discussion yet. I could see where they may use an existing structure and change some of the signage, but obviously that would require a zoning certificate, and the signage would have to comply with the current code. I mean, we do have some allowance for existing sign structures, and we've worked with businesses to allow new sign faces using the same structure, so.
And you did make a note in here about the egress and entrance to the facility, whether it be school, and I like your caveats in there, which make all the sense in the world about volume. You know, we don't want to create a condition that's over on Little York Road when you're talking about, you know, Vandalia Middle School, and everybody double parked along and through there, you know, trying to pick up the kids. We have our own local down here at Northmore, you know, down Old Salem Avenue,
Right.
picking up and dropping off. And it's, you know, that's an area to stay away from at certain times of the day.
Yeah.
We don't know what the volume is. We don't know how many, you know, what attendance is going to be. It is nice to know that, you know, you've got a football field, you know, worth of driving, you know, driveway that's going in and out effectively, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know, there shouldn't be that much, I would think. However, you know, I guess that's for the applicant to respond to as well.
Yeah. There seems to be plenty of queuing on the ingress and egress, but I think it's going to be all about traffic flow and management once you're on the property and in the parking area. So,
And notifications have been sent?
to the surrounding property owners, yes.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Welcome.
Seth, do we know how many students the proposed school would accommodate?
I do not. I think that is a great question, and I'm hopeful the applicant can speak to that as well.
Seth, a question. Are all the buildings going to be utilized? I mean,
It appears that's the case. With the site plan, they've called out the youth building, which is that separate building. There is a sanctuary, there is a school building, and then there is a gym. So I think that all of those are intended to be used throughout the variety of uses that will, that the eventual lessee will use it for, so.
concern I had, I just drove by there to look at it, and if the youth building is being used, is there going to be walking traffic from kids or whoever back to the church sanctuary or the school, and the crossing of that egress? Is there going to be a walkway defined or some kind of signage that says slow or caution?
That's a great point. I mean, we didn't get a lot of information about the operations and the use of the property and the logistics of where kids will be at any given time. But I think if they are to cross the egress or ingress, we would like to see some sort of crosswalk defined for their safety. And I would assume that they're not going to be walking alone. But again, hopefully the applicant can speak to all of that.
And I was concerned too about the steps coming down out of the youth building. They look really in disrepair. The concrete was crumbling and.
Yeah, I think with the pictures, you definitely see some of the work that's yet to be done on the facilities. Again, the applicant's here tonight and hopefully can speak to that. I know that they've done some significant work already. Yeah.
I have a quick question. I know one of our findings of facts that we'll be talking about is, besides just the conditional use, what other permits and licenses and sort of what else they'll need to obtain to, that we should be taking into consideration? Do you know if they've obtained any other kind of license or any sort of permits prior to this, or are they kind of waiting? Is this sort of the first step, and then they'll go on and get the other permits?
Yeah, I
and
think
stuff
this
they
is the
need?
first step. I think if they get the conditional uses, I can issue a zoning certificate for the commercial new use that'll be there. Any interior, exterior work that they continue to do may need building permits. I don't know if you've all heard, but the city has transitioned away from Montgomery County building regulations. The city of Clayton has now been certified as a residential and commercial building department, and we'll be taking that on. We've hired a company, a private firm that will be doing the building services. So they would have to apply through our office for any building or trade permits. And then if there's any state licensing for any of the uses, I'm thinking of the child care and that sort of thing, they would need to get those as well.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so it just sounds like this is sort of the kickoff
Yes,
thing.
I'd
Get the
say
ball
so,
rolling.
in terms of the approvals, yeah.
Okay, all right, great, thank you.
Just to follow up on that, Seth, is there a certification needs to happen for educational facilities?
I'm not 100% sure on that. I mean, obviously, there's private schools all throughout the state. I'm not sure what the licensing requirements are there.
Yeah, I was just kind of thinking that too. They have to adhere to state of Ohio rules, you know, so that everybody is educated the same way consistently.
curriculum and-
Yeah, certain
yeah.
curriculum and so forth and so on.
Yep.
And I don't know how that's set up either, but I was just kind of curious if you knew that.
Yeah. No, and again, hopefully, the applicant is here, and I think the facility representatives are here and maybe can speak to some of those issues.
Thanks, Dan.
Welcome.
Okay, do we have any other questions for staff at this time? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, the applicant, if you'd like to come on up and give us any additional information, that'd be great. And when you come up, go ahead and state your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, Board. My name's Kevin Carlton, representing the applicant. We're out of Springfield, Missouri, called Foundation Capital Resources. And I'd be glad to answer all of the questions that were posed to Seth and more if you have them.
I'll address the concern about the egress and crossing there.
I think you make a good point, and if staff would even like to make a note that a crosswalk would be required when an occupancy permit or something like that is being requested on that youth building, that would be fine with us. By the way, all the staff recommendations are fine with us, so.
Second part of that was, is there intent to repair the steps and to go out and?
Yeah, so there was a previous question, I think, by Mr. McGinnis about some repairs and when the last time it was occupied and so forth. The sanctuary, to my knowledge, was built in the mid-90s. That's the newest structure. The school that links beside it, it has a plaque in it that shows it was built in 1925, I believe. So that school's kind of historic, it's been there for a while. The youth building, I'm not sure how old that two-story structure is. It's detached, but it's old. And if you've been by there over the last few months, you may have seen that we put new roofs on the project that were in very bad need, because the project has probably not been occupied for 7 or 8 years. Could even been a year or two older than that. But the sanctuary, because of its age, is in pretty good shape, and it's not needing much other than some cleanup and painting. We are replacing all of the heating and air units on the rooftop and in the sanctuary itself, just because they're, you know, getting to be 25, 28 years old, and they need to be replaced. So we're doing a lot of roof and mechanical work on them. The church tenant that we have is interested in occupying the sanctuary first, and that'll be an easy thing to request, which is why we're here as well, is just trying to get that conditional use approved so that they could at least start holding their worship services there. The next step is to move into the school remodeling, and then the next step would be to move into the youth building, so we'll be working with them as landlords, doing it in phases. Lots of things on the outside and the inside, from steps to guttering, to lots of things on the inside to just get it repaired and ready to occupy is needed. And so that's why we're going to start with the sanctuary first, because it's easy to occupy and not a lot of additional remodeling and repair work, and then we'll go from there. As soon as we're done with this, if we get favor with you guys and gets approved, one of the next thing we'll be doing is asking for the building department to come out and actually walk through the buildings with us. And we want to make sure we understand the full scope of Clayton codes. So as we move into remodeling of the school and the gymnasium and the youth building, you know, we're prepared for whatever the updated codes meet.
Can you comment on the sewer system too?
Yes, the first thing that we did to prep for even getting a tenant in this project was the septic system that's located across the street was antiquated and old. It wasn't functioning well. To my knowledge, the previous owner that was in there was getting some cited violations because however they were treating the effluent was not meeting the EPA standards. So when they left and we inherited the property back, we knew the first thing that as we prepped for either selling it or leasing it would be to put a new septic system in there. So we hired a local engineer named Tom Dusa was our civil engineer. I'm familiar with Tom. He did a good job of designing a sand filter system, and it's got multiple tanks and a large sand filter, all approved by the EPA, and even recently approved about 4 months ago or so. When we completed it, we got them to sign off on it, met their construction standards, and they actually come out and monitor it as it becomes occupied, like on a monthly basis. We even have to show them we're keeping maintenance records and things like that. But for all practical purposes, this is really a very modern sand filtering septic system.
So you basically tore up the old one and put in this brand-new one?
That's right.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. That's good. And the access then from the facilities under the road into the leach field, if you will, I'm still gonna call it a leach field.
Yep.
That's still good and sound, that's been tested as well?
Yeah, we actually had to improve the pipe that went under Salem Street that took all the waste to that. That met their approval. And we had to create a designated gravel drive for maintenance to get back there. If you pull in there, you'll see that. So, yeah, all updated.
It's good. Yeah, because if you've got facilities that go back 100 years, then, of course, your infrastructure
Yeah.
goes back about that
Right.
long, too. It just kind of begged that question.
Yep.
Yeah, as we're going through. Appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
And then you're on a well system? Where's your well?
Where is the well? The school?
Like in between the two, but out in front.
Okay, so, I don't know if you can see where there is, we've denoted the school. It would be in front of that, probably not far from where the, I'm gonna guess right in here, is that right, Eric?
Further in, closer to.
Over here?
Yep.
Okay.
right in there.
Okay, and the flow, have you had people come out and check that, the water quality, the flow and, the production of the water coming up?
Not recently, but it has been checked in the past, and it all checked out. It was pure water, it wasn't contaminated or anything.
That's good. I was just kind of curious about the actual water table itself down there. If you have a lot of people coming in there, if you have a full school that's running, I want to make sure that, at least you have some thoughts about what would happen if the water table did reduce.
Yes.
And it wasn't available. That could be a problem.
Well-
We don't want to create a problem.
Yep. We sure don't want to have to re-drill another well and go deeper or whatever. We have talked about certain flow issues as we've met with plumbers, and the idea of putting a large storage tank so that if you just don't have enough flow, at least you can store 500 or 1,000 gallons on site, and then it, will refill with whatever rate that your well has. But we don't think we're going to have to do that based on the pressure and the volume we see. But we're sure prepared to do that if we have to.
Okay, that's good, as long as it's, in the thought process, because, those things change.
Yep.
Nature's mighty capricious when it comes to
Right,
wanting
right.
to throw us curveballs, so, okay, I appreciate that. And then the light poles, I was asking Seth about that. Have you guys turned them on?
We have. In fact, it's been probably 6 or 7 weeks ago, we actually had our electrician out there to figure out why we couldn't get them to come on. We weren't sure if we just had burnt out bulbs or there was something wrong with electrical wiring. It took him 2 days on a lift to figure out what was wrong, and we got all but 2 working. In fact, I was out there right as it turned dark at about 5 o'clock, and I was able to actually watch them all come on. There's 2 of them not working, so we'll have to get those fixed. And I know they're not probably considered true shielded lights, but I think you would find that they don't cast light so vertically and horizontally that it would, become a problem for the neighbors. But, if it is, we're sure willing to do whatever we need to shield them properly.
Well, I appreciate that. I think Mr. Dorman or somebody, on staff would be more than willing to work with you on that, to find out, exactly what's going on. You and I both know that light goes a long, long way, and,
Yep.
If you're a neighbor and all of a sudden you got one out there, it's like, all right, where's this
Right.
coming from? So that's where I'm coming from on that. And I do know that shielding is important when it comes to trying to keep that from, glaring into other people's backyards. We all
bet.
get used to things over time.
Right.
Don't get me wrong, but it could cause some consternation, at the beginning. And then you're okay with the parking spots? Seth was rather specific about the 306 existing spots that are out there, that requiring 8, 2 of which are going to be van accessible for ADA, so forth and so on. And,
Yeah, no worries there.
okay, how about the facilities themselves? Are they ADA certified? Is there any changes that are going to have to be made there to either the sanctuary
Well,
or the school?
The sanctuary has a 0 entry and it's got 3 doors. The bathrooms have ADA sizing to them and fixtures, so we feel good about the sanctuary that was constructed back in the middle 90s. The school and the youth building all have some stair access issues, and that's why we're actually interested in seeing what building regulations has to say about some of that. But, when you get these 1920 buildings, there becomes a point where we can do all we can, and then we're hoping there's some allowances because of what the building is, so.
I can appreciate what you're saying there. I mean, you almost went through the wall, but I grew up in one of those 1920s buildings, and they were a lot more dangerous than that step over there.
Right, exactly, yes.
Okay, that makes sense to me too, and I appreciate that. I appreciate those comments about that. Now, we were talking a little bit, and maybe or maybe somebody else can address the volume, the number of people expected here. You said that the plan was initially to look at the sanctuary, open that up, get that fitted out, and up and running for worship. Great. Then phase into the school, then phase into the youth building, and I like a phased approach rather than just stand up there and tell us, oh yeah, we're going to get everything done, and grand openings and going to be in February,
Right.
So that's good. That's I like that thought process. Do you have any feel for volume?
Well, one of the reasons we felt comfortable making the deal with the tenant that we did is that they have a vision greater than just some of the tenants that we have met with prospectively that just had a vision for a church only. But when we met with them several times talking about what they could see happening on this, making it a campus, it caused us to get very interested in figuring out how we could negotiate a deal. From school standpoints, there's 12 really big classrooms on 3 floors in there. It's got a lunchroom that connects to the gym and so forth. And I know that there'll be school standards that say there's only so many students per teacher and maybe so many students per square feet. We don't know what that is yet, but we'd like to figure out how to fill those 12 classrooms, with something that meets, rules for what a school would be. And the same with any kind of a daycare, childcare facility. There's so much of that, as you guys know, that's legislated and has certain laws and jurisdictions behind it. We don't know exactly what all that occupancy means yet. We're just now kind of stepping into it. Yep.
And I can appreciate that. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I know where all those couplings are and how they're going to be made either. And that's not what we do. And I certainly don't have experience in that personally. So I can't tell you that I, names and faces and, you know,
Right.
go knock on somebody's door. But you're right, and there is a lot of catch-up that needs to happen along those lines. You know, you're from Missouri, we're from Ohio, you know, and I know that the laws are different between different states. You know, it's just the way it is, and it's just the way it's set up.
Right.
So, you know, again, I'm appreciative of your awareness of that. So thank you for that.
Yeah, the last note I would tell you is we're committed as landlords to try to assist the tenant in being successful in remodeling, meeting code. Then they'll kind of take that business model and figure out what that means for teacher to student ratios and childcare numbers and things like that. So we'll be kind of partnering if you want to look at it that way.
And you're going to be with them every step of the way?
So the reason I'm here as well is I'm not only representing the landowner, but this part of what I do is the construction solutions. So this is a perfect project to figure out how do we solve a lot of the issues in these buildings and then let them, you know, occupy it and be successful with what they want to do. And for
Sounds
what
like a
it's
fun
worth
job.
too, Seth has been, I deal with a lot of jurisdictions and cities. Seth was really good to work with, and I would say that if your building department is anything like him, we'll do well together.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
You bet.
I had a kind of a specific question, since we were talking about the school, like, as far as traffic flow, have you guys even thought about that? I know that obviously the sanctuary's first, the church and everything, and then, but, I mean, obviously there would be a safety concerns with young children and dropping off, picking up, that sort of thing. Have you guys considered how you're
Well-
gonna handle all of that?
We haven't, but I know we'll have to get into that. Last fall, we just completed a really large child care and pre-K facility on a Florida project, and that city wanted a massive amount of stacking, more than I could ever think they would have needed for drop-off and pickup. Well, I was there about a week after, and wow, they needed it, okay? Well, if you look at the length of that parking lot, literally you could go in the egress on the right of the gym and really have queuing all the way to the back in the parking lot. Then they could come to, anyway, we could have lots and lots of stacking if we need to.
Yeah, I know, especially if you have young kids there, it seems like parents
Right.
like to stack, to queue, so
Had
you're
a
gonna
new
want, you're
appreciation
gonna want
for
that,
that.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, just as long as that's kind of in the work, you know,
Yep.
obviously you're not to that point yet, but I
I
just.
think what's really
think that should be
interesting
important.
about this is we have a very, very large parking lot to suit a large church. Well, it would be great for how you put stacking lanes in there that could hold dozens and dozens and dozens of cars. So I feel like we could meet any challenge needed on that, you know?
Okay, thank you. Anything else from the board for our applicant?
Can you tell us about your tenant, and are they here tonight?
They are. The pastor's here representing his church, Pastor Craig Walder, and he's here. You feel free to ask him anything you'd like to. We're just getting started together. Stage one was get the property dried in with new roofs right after the septic was in, and now we're getting ready to step in together if we get our approval this evening into a lot of remodeling work together, so.
It sounds like he intends to speak tonight.
If you'd like him to, yes.
Hold on just a minute, we'll have you come up in a minute. Okay, thank you so much, we appreciate all the information.
Appreciate it.
Okay, at this time, do I hear a motion to open the floor to public comments?
I move to open the floor for public comment.
I'll second.
All who agree, please say aye.
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 Okay, at this time, we'll open the floor to public comment. So if you'd like to, if anybody is wanting to speak publicly, please come on up. Make sure you state your name and address for the record and give us any information you'd like to.
Good evening, Board. My name is Craig Walder. My address is 4151 Stonewall Circle, Dayton, Ohio, even though it feels like it's Clayton. But I am the lead pastor of Chosen Church, and it's just our desire to be a positive impact to the community. These great, wonderful neighbors right there. I'm sure they like their voting precinct back, so that's something we'll also offer as well. But as far as the the church, that's the main thing we want to get going. I believe every block needs a church. We are a multi-ethnic church because we believe heaven is no color, black or white. So heaven looks like this, and that's our goal. And then as far as the school, my natural job, I am a principal, so I know a little bit of the stuff that we need. And as the school is set right now, it is set that it can do K through 4 with the floors and the classrooms and the gymnasium and everything. And even with the parking and dismissal, we would always do the stacking, but also staggering dismissal with kindergarten through 4th grade. There's a certain way you stack the dismissal where certain parents will be able to get in there in a smooth, and the parking lot is huge. So it would be a perfect way it wouldn't bother the traffic that's coming on that street as far as the school and everything. But again, it's phases, and this was kind of like getting the ball rolling on that and everything, because there are certain certificates we would need as far as special education, handicap accessible and all that stuff. So as Mr. Kevin said, we are just this was the main thing that we've been praying about, meeting with you all. That's why I'm nervous right now. But yeah, any questions that you have for our church or me, I'm here to answer.
What kind of crowd are you expecting on Sundays?
Right now, we've been open 7 months, and we are sitting in between. Our membership roll right now is right at 100 members. We have a lot of youth. How we do our witnessing, I believe you get out and you witness, not knocking on people's door and scaring people, but you promote the church and what God is all about, and it's kind of been going well. We are in downtown Dayton right now. We have been able to serve the privileged and underprivileged, and it would be the same thing as we come over here, is just getting to know the people, and however God just says we're gonna grow, that's how we go. It's not a specific number. I love for us to pack the place out, but more people, more problems. But right now we're sitting at 100 and some odd people. Yes, ma'am.
You heard the discussion that we had with Kevin, Mr. Carlton. I get nervous too, and I've been sitting up here for years. Do you have any comments about, the lighting, the sewer system, the water? Like, again, I'm concerned about infrastructure and making sure that the facility that you move into there is going to support your needs and, not kill the bank either.
Yeah.
So, do you have any comments about the previous discussion?
Yes, sir. Being a man of faith, we always put it in God's hand, but naturally, as I said, I'm a principal, and of course the water thing, that was a main concern, especially having kids and what they drink and everything, and we're not trying to get no lawsuits or nothing like that. So the water issue is something that we really discussed, but the park, when he said we would have a storage supply, even another school that I worked at, there was water issues. If you know the city of Dayton, it's always issues. But it was a storage supply that they had. So having that storage supply is a great thing to make you feel more confident about it, dealing with that. But that was a major issue, as well as, the signs that we would need to put up, the walkways, even getting the youth building and the stairs. We wouldn't be able to do nothing with the white building until those stairs were all put back together the right way. So.
Yeah, it seems to me like it's going to be a project for you, my friend.
Yes, sir.
But a good one, and I like your attitude and your energy and your faith,
Yeah.
moving into it. So
Yes, sir.
that's all good. But we have to still go with our eyes wide open.
Right.
Yeah, I don't want, like I say, I don't want you to get in trouble here.
Right.
Yeah, the lights, you're going to run into things like that. Like we talked about the lights, the box lights. And rules are rules, and of course, neighbors are neighbors, and shielding is shielding when it comes to some of this stuff. And these are the specific considerations that we have to look at as a board to be able to look at your application and say, is it going to be compatible?
Yes, sir.
So, we kind of beat up lights a little bit. You might be sitting there going, box lights, good grief, But it's part of our specific requirements
Right.
here, and that's why we go through them step by step so that you understand what you're getting into here. Do you have any considerations about that too? Apparently they're on a timer. Apparently they come on at night.
Yes, sir.
So that's a good thing. I guess what we could do is we could take a look at that, we could work with Seth, find out, just what those lumens are as they're being cast around the neighborhood, and just pick off these things one step at a time.
Yes, sir.
Is probably what you're gonna end up doing, and it's gonna probably seem like an endless mountain that you're climbing too at times. But when you move into a new place, especially with a building that's 100 years old, that's what we're getting ourselves into. And again, that's why we're asking the questions that we ask.
Yes, sir.
So I appreciate your consideration on that, Pastor.
Do we have anything else from the board for?
There's 3 properties that are very, very close to the property that we're discussing tonight. Have you reached out to those individuals, gotten to know them, had any relationship building yet?
Yeah, well, we'll talk to him, and as well as one of the other neighbors. They rode over on a golf cart, and we got to talk to them, as well as the neighbors across the street. We always want to, even though we didn't have the property, just to let them know that we're trying to look at the property and make the necessary steps to make it not look like just a big eyesore anymore. So we've made our due diligence in talking to the neighbors and everything.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Is that it? Yes. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Mr. Dorman, do we have any public comments from any letters or emails or any calls?
I did get one, and I think it's in reference to one that the pastor mentioned, but Chris Curtis at 211 East Salem Street, you guys may remember him. He came in for a variance for an automatic pool cover. Did say that he talked to the pastor and that he is supportive of the conditional uses.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else from the public who wanted to speak? Okay, do I hear a motion to close the floor for public comment?
Make a motion to close the floor.
I'll second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, at this time, we will begin going through our findings of facts. So what we have to do is we go through our findings of facts to just discuss kind of what we've been discussing and certain items we need to discuss as a board in order to approve a conditional use. Okay, apologize. Lots of papers here. Okay, so I guess I will just go ahead and go through them, and then board members, as we go through, if it's anything you'd like to add or anything you want to discuss as we go through each one, we can stop and do that. Okay, so what we do is we'll go through this findings of fact, and the City of Clayton Planning and Zoning Code provides the standards for conditional use approval. The board shall not grant a conditional use unless it shall, in each specific case, make specific written findings of fact directly based upon the particular evidence presented to it that support conclusions that, number 1, adequate utility, drainage, and other such necessary facilities have been or will be provided. I do agree with this. We have discussed quite at length as far as the septic, the new septic system. The water has been tested. We've been discussing some other issues as far as traffic patterns and that sort of thing with the school. So I agree with this.
Yeah, I agree. The water detention is on the site. There's considerations from staff about cleaning it up and making sure that it's going to be draining properly. We did talk about the water service, and as of today, pressure seems to be current, the flow seems to be good. However, with an increase in attendance, with the additional opening of perhaps facilities like the school, there may be a drain on that. It probably would not hurt for the applicant to continue to look at the well system, continue to monitor the flow, and to continue to have the water tested so that we don't have a particular problem, as Camp Lejeune, if you'll excuse my pun there. But, we don't need that. And I think monitoring that would be something that we should consider also, to be able to support this particular finding of fact.
And I do believe we should make sure we include a condition, if we do approve, the condition about the ensuring that the inlet and outlets for the existing dry detention basin are in good working order and provide evidence to the city of Clayton for that. So make sure so when we go through things, we'll make sure we add these additional conditions. So if there's any additional conditions that you all want to provide as well, as we go through these, we'll note them at this time as well.
No, and I think that Kevin mentioned, Mr. Carlton mentioned that the septic system has periodic maintenance that's been ascribed to as well. That should be also followed to make sure that that system is behaving and functioning properly, and that there's no issue with that as well. So that should be put in here under adequate drainage utility and other such necessary facilities.
Okay, we good with number 1? Okay.
Just a question, a point, I'm sorry. No. Would the ADA go in here too? Having facilities check for ADA?
Might be in the next, maybe number 2.
Okay, go ahead. My fault.
Nope, it's okay. I'm not sure. I will. Maybe 3.
Sorry.
Nope, you're right. I think as long as we get it included at the end, we're good.
See, we're nervous too. What do you think?
Number 2, adequate access roads or entrance and exit drives will be provided and will be so designed as to prevent traffic hazards and to minimize traffic conflicts and congestion to public streets and alleys. We did talk about this a bit. I do agree. I mean, there's an ingress and egress, so there's the two, you've got the in and the out. So there's already kind of a natural flow there as it is, because it's been used before, so this isn't a brand-new facility. We don't need to recreate the wheel. However, I do think we need to address if we want to put a crosswalk in place and any kind of slow signs, just for safety reasons, would be a great idea to include something like that, as well as when we get to the point of when the school opens, stacking and/or how they are going to line up cars around the parking lot and everything. That should definitely be discussed and create a plan in place to prevent traffic hazards and for the safety of the children.
In addition to having the city look at school sign requirements that we may have around active school zones. I'm not sure how that's really laid out, but I'm sure there's an ORC that addresses that we have to look at as well. At this point, I'd like to just make a comment. Seth, this is pretty much for you, I think, and again, a consideration for the board. All this is put together. I like it. I like the application. Nevertheless, we're talking about a phased development where we're going to be looking at phasing in the sanctuary first, then looking at the school, then looking at, and basically what that is it's biting off sizable chunks, but they're nevertheless manageable chunks as we move forward in the future. Does it make sense for this conditional use to be addressing those phases, to be worked with the foundation, Carlton Resources, so that, as the program manager goes forward, they start working with you saying, okay, this is what we're working with now. Now we're going to be going into the school. What do we need to do? What do we need to do education-wise, so forth and so on? Does it make sense to do that? Typically we'd be done and we'd say yay, verily, but we need to leave you with some sort of an infrastructure and a plan to work with, I think.
Yeah, I think it does. I think in that it's phased. I can work with them on a zoning certificate for commercial use for each piece of it. And at that time, kind of get into the more of the weeds with the site management and safety concerns and the other things that have been mentioned. But I think if you mention that, that gives me kind of the basis to move forward with
Okay, I appreciate that, and it just dawned on me here as we were going through the discussion. This would be something that the planning board would go through. They'd look at, you'd have a program manager who'd put together a plan. This is how we're going to develop this particular property, so forth and so on. They'd have that in place, and then it'd go in front of council. It wouldn't come to us because we're the exception rather than the rule. But in this case, there's an awful lot of work that's going to be done, assuming the granting of the conditional use, which to me has a lot more overlap into that type of development. So I just want to make sure that we leave you with something and some leverage so that you can say, and you can work with the owner and the tenants to say, oh, where are we going next, and have some sort of a cadence and communication established. Does that make sense?
It does, and I would certainly like to look at a kind of a plan, a specific plan for each phase.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Point of clarification on that. So we are voting tonight to allow the conditional use for both purposes, but there will be a disclaimer of some sort that says you get a bit of direction as the repairs to the school building are being made.
I think that's going to occur anyway, but for you to kind of put it on the record, it's again something that we can kind of go back to and say, the board wanted this as well, but this is the process that you'll have to follow, which is a specific zoning certificate for the church, which they've applied for and will issue if they are to get approval for the conditional use. But then as the school comes online, as the youth building comes online, we'll look at those different issues and make sure that all of those boxes are being checked.
So, yeah, so a little more clarification. So we'll add this as a condition to the approval of the existing application, just as a condition to, I guess, how should we word, somehow to come up with a plan with staff for the phased implementation of the different buildings, or?
And I think what you've done in some past decisions is you've got your list of specific conditions, but maybe also further recommend that the applicant continue to work with staff as each phase comes on.
Recommendation.
Just to make sure that all of the things that we've discussed tonight are being adhered to.
And that would be in our qualifications at the end.
Yeah.
Got you. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thanks. Just want to make a note of that. Okay. Good discussion. Okay, number 3. So I guess we're done with number 2, right? Everybody's good? Okay. Number 3, all necessary permits and licenses for the use and operation of the conditional use have been obtained, or evidence has been submitted that such permits and licenses are obtainable for the proposed conditional use on the property. I'm going to agree with this, especially if we're going to put in a recommendation that they continue to work with staff throughout the process, during the different phases, because that will help them understand which types of licenses and/or permits they're going to need throughout the process. So
Yeah,
that'll kind of be included in our.
I totally agree with that. And that, it's the educational certificates, health certificates, daycare type of certification that needs to happen. I mean, good grief, you got probably the health department that needs to go in there if it's going to be an active, cafeteria. It just goes on and on. So, yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, and that may not be something that staff has all the answers to, but they can point them in the right direction.
Or they may be
Or
part
the-
of the phase that they don't want to go ahead and work, and that's fine too. So, okay.
Okay, number 4. All exterior lights for artificial open-air illumination are so shaded as to avoid casting direct light upon any property located in a residential zone. We had brief discussions. My understanding, and staff, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, Mr. Dorman, because they're existing light structures, there's nothing we need to necessarily tell them to do differently with them because they're already there. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think because they're there, they're working, we would not necessarily have to dictate shielding. I think if, it becomes an issue, that's something that I would probably reach back out to the property owner on and try to get some sort of resolution, be it a retrofit, or eventually those fixtures are probably gonna serve their useful life and have to be replaced, at which time we'll work with them to get properly shielded fixtures.
Okay, so if they ever have to replace them, then at that point, it will have to be to code
Yes.
specifics. Okay, okay. I would be okay with that, and it sounds like the tenant, everybody's willing to work if there's any kind of issues with anybody, so I think we're good on that one.
I agree.
Okay, number 5, the location and size of the conditional use, the nature and intensity of the operation involved or conducted in connection with it, the size of the site in relation to it, and the location of the site with respect to streets giving access to it, shall be such that it will be in harmony with the appropriate and orderly development of the district in which it is located.
Yeah, I think we spoke to the size and the amount of people we can expect, and the fact that it's a phased project, alleviates my concerns about the amount of increased traffic that might happen. So I'd be happy to agree with this one.
I think also it has previously been a church and a school, so this isn't new. This isn't anything. It's just because the code has changed and the zoning district has changed, so it needs to be a conditional use now. So I think that can be taken into consideration as well. Okay. Number 6, the location, nature, and height of buildings, structures, walls, and fences on the site, and the nature and extent of landscaping and screening on the site shall be such that the use will not unreasonably hinder or discourage the appropriate development, use, and enjoyment of adjacent land, buildings, and structures. I'm good with this one, except for the recommendations that staff has made as far as some of the landscaping that needs to be corrected, and same with, let's see, there are a couple things. Clear the overgrown vegetation located in the existing dry detention basin, and then also with the overgrowing of vegetation in the northwest quadrant of the parking lot. So we'll make sure to include those as conditions. Everybody's good with that?
Agreed.
Is there any others on that one? I don't know if that would be, the additional parking spaces on that one, or maybe the next one.
Yes, I was going to put those down as recommendations at the end. Yeah.
Okay, that works. So we're good. We're good on number 6 then. Okay. We're getting there, I promise. We have 8 of them. Okay, number 7. Evidence that the conditional use desired will not adversely affect the public health, safety, and morals. I would agree. I mean, as we've previously stated, this property, if anything, this is going to help the property out by making it useful again and not just an eyesore.
Agreed.
Okay. Number 8, in granting a conditional use certificate, the board may impose such conditions, safeguards, and restrictions upon the premises is benefited by the conditional use as may be necessary to comply with the standards set out in this code to reduce or minimize potentially injurious effects of such conditional uses upon other property in the neighborhood, and to carry out the general purpose and intent of this code. I would agree, and we have been discussing some of these conditions, so let's kind of run through, make sure we're all in agreement on the conditions. That way when we go to, if we decide to approve, when we do the approval, we will also list out all those conditions as we do the approval. Okay, so I believe we should begin with the 4 that were from staff. If everybody's good with those 4, is everybody good with those? Okay. And then we also wanted to add the recommendation to work with staff during each phase as they move from the sanctuary to the classroom to the school to the gymnasium, whichever the phased approach that they have, and during each phase to work with staff to determine which permits and everything they would need in order to be up to code. Okay. Are there any other conditions anybody can think of that they would like to add? I know we kind of discussed lighting, but I think we're okay on that one at this point. It sounds like that's going to be more of a, if it comes up as an issue, be worked with on staff.
Yeah, and as I've known in the past, and it's an old mantra, the best plan is the one that gets upset in day one, right? So what's going to happen is that you're going to find something else, and it's going to happen. Know it's going to. We all do, and that's okay. As long as the communication is open, you guys should be fine in moving forward. as long as there's no showstoppers. But, anything that we come up with isn't going to be inclusive because there's going to be something else. I just know it. Anytime we get into a big project like that, this does happen. So that's the only thing I really have to say about that. Whatever we put in here is great. It's a great start, and I think it is a good start. So we can use that as a springboard to move forward.
Okay, anything else from board you want to discuss? Okay, then I'm going to say, based on the above, that the application does meet the standards for conditional use that are listed in section 1141.08A5I of the City of Clayton Planning and Zoning Code. So therefore, do I hear a motion? And if we have a motion, please go ahead and list all of the conditions so we have them on record.
Yeah, I'll move we approve conditional use CU 23-01 with the following recommendations. Number one, that the applicant to comply with EDA guidelines for restriping a parking lot and provide 2 more accessible parking spaces. They should be both sized as van accessible spaces. 2, the applicant to ensure the inlet and outlets for the existing dry detention basin are in good working order and provide evidence of the fact to City of Clayton. 3, applicant to clear the overgrown vegetation located in the existing dry detention basin, including weeds, cattails, and trees, to ensure that the design volume of the dry detention basin is not compromised. 4, the applicant to trim the overgrowing vegetation in the northwest quadrant of the parking lot because it's minimizing the full width of the drive aisle in that area. 5, the applicant and development manager works with the City of Clayton on specific phase planning of the project to start first with the sanctuary, then with the school, and then with the other buildings, to open it up to its full capacity. And during that planning session, work with the City of Clayton to ensure that each of the individual specified conditions and findings of fact that we went through tonight are adhered to as new functionality is increased on that property. This conditional use is more like an umbrella policy, if you will. It's very encompassing. And as we go through the phase development, then we would need to make sure that the specific recommendations that we went through tonight with each phase then are met, which is why I'm kind of saying it that way.
I'll second.
Okay, roll call.
Ms. Weeks?
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis?
Yes?
Ms. Hunter?
Yes.
Mr. Madewell?
Yes.
Ms. Caldwell? Yes.
Okay, congratulations, your conditional use has been approved. Okay, at this time, let's see, finish going through our agenda really quickly, if I can find, here we go. So that is complete. So anything on our next meeting at this time?
No applications at this time.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.